Hi, everybody. Welcome officially. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading, where we'll be hearing new literature from the press. We're going to be reading from John Huston, author of Absolute Ibis Monarchy, released on May 20th, Doc Richter, author of Olive Eye, released on May 27th, and Richard Carson Bailey, author of PANACEA, The Age of Ag, released on June 24th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. You can, of course, also find the books on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. I'm also going to put the links to each of the books directly on the Atmosphere website right in the chat. So definitely feel free to check those out throughout the event. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So if you think of a question for one or more of our authors during the readings, just go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments in addition to your questions. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to support John, Doc, and Richard today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is John Huston. John is a philosopher who has achieved what many scientifically inclined religious writers have struggled to do for millennia. He has been able to unite scientific thinking with religious thinking to provide a unified vision of humanity's place in the universe. This is essential reading for those who are asking the most fundamental questions concerning the enlightenment and illumination required as humanity faces an uncertain future. Absolute Ibis Monarchy, which is the book we'll be hearing John read from today, is a thought-provoking exploration of spiritual and philosophical themes woven into a narrative that challenges conventional views on governance, monarchy, and the divine. Let's now welcome John.
Good evening, everyone. I'm reading from the end of the chapter, Politics is the Problem. And I'm moving on from there into the next chapter, which is called Music, the Language of God. After that bout of explosive language, where politicians criticize and seek to misrepresent each other, we should now prepare ourselves for consideration of a radically different form of language, the language of God, which is music. At the time of the Russian Revolution, Alexander Blok stated that every movement has its birth in the spirit of music, and then it degenerates. He also stated that the human culture of the future would be nourished by what was akin to the music and well-stressed floods and forces to which Richard Wagner had given special expression. In 1988, I became familiar with the philosophical writings of a Bulgarian musician named Bensa Dunov, also known as Peter Dunov. He maintained that up until now, the human race had only experienced what could be described as an introduction to music. He articulated his conviction in 1944 that as we arrive and then go beyond the new millennium, the door to heaven would then be open for us, and this would take place by means of music. I must look out my dancing shoes. From the earliest of times, it was recognized that music had the ability to influence people in ways that meant that music was, in effect, incomparable. Not only could its effect on people be hypnotic, mood-changing, but it also had the ability to bridge the gap between our world and the world of the gods. For this reason, the wise Socrates stated that music was the highest philosophy, and that with his dying breath, he would do the same as a dying swan and sing out in praise of Apollo, who was their common master. The great guides of the human race, such as Hermes Trismegistus, Ion, the son of Apollo, Orpheus, Krishna, and others, were all primarily musicians, with music being the most potent means for God to communicate with the human race. Music alone had the power to awaken humanity to the realization of its divine nature. At this present time, some very interesting things have been said about music. Bob Fripp, guitarist with King Crimson, stated that music has a life of its own and calls on some unlikely characters to give it voice. When asked the question, where does music come from? He replied, where was the world before it was made? Find that place and you'll find music. He once adamantly suggested that music is primarily a social activity and therefore takes place in live performance, and live performance in its nature is ephemeral. Playing music at the intensity of these young Englishmen on a night when the muse descended has a relatively short duration in the stream of consecutive moments, even more so with the King Crimson of 1969. Another of the great bands was Soft Machine, who, along with King Crimson, Pink Floyd, and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, broke the bonds of convention and took music to a whole new level. Concerning Soft Machine, whose roots were in Canterbury in Kent, we read that in hindsight, Soft Machine's evolution could only have taken place in the musically free-thinking environment that was the British music scene in the late 1960s and early 70s. Theirs was an evolution that would produce some of the most startlingly brilliant and innovative music of the highly creative period. They were among the first British bands to embrace psychedelia. Their album, Third, was destined to be an ambitious work, so much so that Mike Ratledge's stunning improvisational ability, bringing incredible sounds from an electric organ, was perhaps Soft Machine's most free-form work ever. Indeed, much of the likes of which had never been unheard from a British band. And as we consider music, it would be thoroughly inappropriate to fail to mention the musician of the millennium, John McLaughlin, also known as Mahavishnu John McLaughlin. In the booklet provided from the CD Apocalypse, we read of how we read of John McLaughlin and his exceptional ability. It's astonishing that when you consider how radically he redefined his instrument, and it's almost unbelievable in these days when music school diplomas are handed out like lottery tickets. But John McLaughlin, born in Yorkshire, England in 1942, is largely self-taught. McLaughlin plays from the heart, but never abandons what he, like any good musician, worked so hard to find, a unique voice of his own that speaks from the deepest concerns in a language which is accessible to anyone willing to take some time to listen, which is why McLaughlin could and did reshape the conception of his instrument through his astonishingly agile, endlessly inventive playing, and the conception of music itself through his probing and simplistic writing. He is, in any language, a master. Would you like me to do some more?
Sure, there's still some time left if you'd like to continue reading.
Do you want me to read some more?
Yeah, that would be fine if you've got a little more you'd like to read.
I'm talking here about Richard Wagner. Wagner had a fascination for philosophy, and there were those who believed that they had encountered prophetic insight in Wagner, and that his music was the means whereby a deeper and more powerful spiritual message was being imparted to the human race. For those who revere Richard Wagner above all others, his music is nothing short of divine revelation. And for this reason, musicians, both composers and artists, can play an important part in awakening the consciousness of humanity to new ideas or spiritual inspiration. Also, those changes in lifestyle which usher in a new age.
All right. Thank you so much, John. And thank you for kind of exposing the almost like an exposition for us here. So we have more to dive into with your book. Reading next today is Doc Richter. Doc has received national writing awards for his novels and is president of the San Antonio Writers Guild, as well as past president of the California Writers Club. He's an active member of the Writers League of Texas. Dr. Richter moderates a weekly multi-state online critique session and is an international writing contest judge. Today, we'll be hearing Doc read from Olive Eye, in which Alan Glass, a former IAEA weapons inspector, is thrust into a deadly game of revenge and global stakes. After a chance meeting with Elise Saint-Maron, who warns him about nuclear proliferation, Alan is drawn into a conspiracy involving dirty bombs. But when his family is brutally murdered, his mission becomes personal. Doc, take it away.
Thank you so much. First of all, one of the things I try to do for my readers is make a story as live and believable as I can. Part of that for me is physically going to the places that I write about. Olive Eye takes place in about a dozen countries. I've been to them all except two. I have no desire whatsoever to go to Iraq or North Korea. But other than those two, it's important to me to have a feel for the place to be able to allow the reader to share that feel. So I'm going to read the first chapter of Olive Eye. October 1998, stunted rock rose and storksbill bushes spotted the Arabian desert to the horizon. No humans in sight other than the occasional trucker and our four-man Iraqi security army escort on the road ahead of us. The sun weighed down like an overheated skillet. The 115-degree heat withered the plants and the people. Mirages glimmered in every direction as our SUV raced across the empty landscape. Wind-blown sand obscured the road. My two compatriots and I squirmed to get comfortable. The new vehicle sported only a few wrinkles on the sturdy white skin, but the air conditioner was either broken or disabled. Our Iraqi driver appeared impervious to the temperature. We slammed into the umpteenth pothole on the long ride from Mukieb in southern Iraq to Baghdad. Our equipment cases bounced and rattled in the back like we banged about up front. Fuck, Yannick Wolf said. Another jolt like that will break my back. Janik was my engineer, big German with a perpetual sunburn. He was the best man to disassemble and destroy uranium and plutonium processing machinery. Hugh Lambert smiled wearily. At least you'd escape before the rest of us. He was my tech from Belgium, short and thin with black hair. He constantly pushed his eyeglasses up the bridge of his nose. He handled our radiation detection, video, and communications gear. Yeah, there's that, Janik said. I stared out the window at the brutal place. My name was Dr. Alan Glass, a weapons inspector for the International Atomic Energy Agency's Department of Safeguards. I had traveled to many inhospitable places, including this one. My team and I had finished another week fighting the heat and belligerent Iraqis to find and dismantle remnants of Hussein's atom bomb program. While we searched for their enrichment sites, fissionable material, and lab, they hid everything possible and gave us false leads. High stakes, hide and seek. Our Iraqi military detail pretended to protect us. They'd probably have shot us if they could get away with it. Unfriendly people. We never who they defended us against. The Iraqi civilians we encountered remained shocked that Saddam lost Kuwait 7 years ago, contrary to the dictator's propaganda. We surmised our chauffeur was a soldier in civilian clothes. The man in his early 30s with close-cropped hair feigned to speak a little English, but we never said anything important near him. We always had obstacles to our job, nothing new, just a different nation trying to conceal development of weapons of mass destruction. Our efforts satisfied all of us. Limiting nukes was a fulfilling endeavor. The Suburban hit yet another deep pothole, and I calculated 2 more hours to our hotel. My mind went to my wife, Tara, and our daughter, Caitlin, safe at home in Geneva. I ached for them. As we pulled into the outskirts of Baghdad, the team sighed with relief. We needed showers after baking in our oven bags, which were hazmat suits, twice that day. Clean clothes, a call to Tara and Caitlin, and a chance to compare ideas and experiences with the 3 other IAEA inspection teams made the hot, dirty, teeth-jarring ride worthwhile. The Coral Baghdad Hotel on University Street in the Iraqi capital was our home away from home. The motif was a mix of swords, Arabic banners proclaiming Iraq's greatness, and the ubiquitous portraits of Saddam. My team loaded our gear onto carts when we arrived and muscled them into the lobby. The concierge in a black suit and charcoal tie hurried over and handed me a message. What's that? Theo asked. I pulled the card from the envelope and smiled. An invitation to the French embassy. I checked my watch. We need to hustle. The bus leaves in 40 minutes. Theo and Janik sprinted to the elevators. My call to Tara and Caitlin will be delayed until after the party. Foreign government receptions were a treat after a long week sifting through abandoned nuclear facilities. The embassy served alcohol, unlike everywhere else in the country, and the French always outdid the other nations as if it was a point of honor. The international team's mood on the minibus to the party was happy anticipation. Janik joked in his loud voice, and Theo laughed and pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose. No one talked about work. I thought about Tara and Caitlin and our next call. The inspectors fought their way off the bus at the tan and gray brick building near the River Tigris. Once unloaded, 2 European men in stylish jackets ushered us to the patio at the back of the building. Embassy parties allowed us to temporarily forget our gritty, blistering posting. The events were also spy central. We went into places like Libya and North Korea looking for evidence the host country sought to conceal and everyone else desired to learn about. The possibility of discovering unpublished intelligence was the reason the spies invited us. This reception didn't disappoint. The courtyard was shaded with blue, white, and red cloth that fluttered in the cooling breeze off the Tigris. Fresh flower arrangements adorned the table, while 20 other Europeans milled across the terracotta tile, all with beverages. We hurried to the liquor station. For me, a cold Heineken washed away the desert better than anything. The introductions began, the mingling, the inevitable questions from our hosts. I found a quiet place to the back nearest the river because I preferred not to participate in the conversations. I savored my second beer when a stunning, petite, nicely proportioned blonde in her late 20s approached me. She had the palest blue eyes, almost translucent. Her nose was slender and her smile bright. Perfect medium-length hair. She wore expensive heels, bringing her height up to about 5'5". Her turquoise dress emphasized her figure. She held a glass of white wine and extended her hand. I'm Elise Barrar, Assistant Cultural Attaché, she said in Paris accented French. Right. A beautiful woman at the embassy in this shithole country? Unlikely. She was a spy. Alan Glass. Ah, Dr. Glass, I learned much about you. She sipped her wine and stared up at me over the rim of her glass. I almost laughed out loud. She didn't bother to pretend to be a diplomat. What have you heard? She moved closer. Well, born in New York, you grew up in Switzerland. You earned your PhD at Berkeley and joined the IAEA 3 years ago. That was standard vitae available to anyone and didn't concern me. You have a wife and daughter in Geneva, and your parents live in Zurich. You are fluent in 6 languages, including Arabic. That got my attention. Those details were not common knowledge. I reacted and she touched my arm. Sorry, I did not mean to alarm you. You have a high reputation, so you are of interest. I tried to be polite, but my personal life was none of anyone's business. Interest to whom? And please don't tell the Iraqis they speak their language. That would hinder our work. Your secret is secure with me, she smiled and added. Many countries don't want more members in the atomic club. You are important because you help prevent nuclear proliferation. That applies to all the inspectors here. Correct, but your qualifications are impeccable. She paused. I would like to ask you one question before I meet other guests. With a physics doctorate from Cal, why did you join Safeguards? No mystery to anyone who knew me. I didn't want to build bombs or nuclear power plants, so I decided to try to keep mankind from vaporizing itself. She nodded and frowned slightly. I hope more people think as you do. Good evening, Dr. Glass. We will talk again soon. She walked away. God, I wish I had known that encounter would destroy so many lives. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Doc. You've left us kind of on a cliffhanger, so we'll have to find out more from the book itself.
Okay.
Our final reader for today is Richard Carson Bailey. Richard cut his writer's teeth as a copywriter at General Electric, his computer teeth as a programmer for U.S. Steel, and as a visualizer as a photogrammetrist in the U.S. Air Force. His screenplays have won numerous awards, and his first novel, Panacea, is a result of his contention that the greatest danger of artificial intelligence isn't that robots will decide to kill us. Rather, it's that we'll become so dependent on AI we'll no longer be able to solve the simplest problems, in which case human agency will vanish and will become like children. I can't help but feel this feels very accurate to the possible coming future. But enough about that from me, because now we'll be hearing from Richard read from Panacea, where it's the 31st century and life is perfect. Everyone lives in high-end, all-inclusive tropical resorts inside massive domes, but for 16-year-old Dorothea, it's too perfect. Every need is met, every day predictable, nothing ever goes wrong. Then, because of an unexpected crisis, the superintelligence that rules the world decides that to save humans from extinction, her dome must be shut down. We'll hear more now from Richard.
Yes, thank you, Vahela. Before I begin, I want to congratulate Atmosphere on creating just a beautiful, gorgeous, stunning cover. I don't know how well that is being picked up. And you probably can't see it, but in the background, there's a line of robots in front of this dome. Okay, with that, Panacea, the Age of Ag. Prologue, 12th of August, 3025. A perfectly manicured field of emerald green tomato plants stretches from a line of trees to the horizon. Lush red tomatoes hang heavily from their vines. A hawk-sized fourth-order AI drone whirls slowly overhead in a complex meandering pattern. Using spectrographic analysis to determine ripeness, the drone transmits data to an AH-1108 robotic planter harvester poised at the field's zero matrix point. Lying in wait along one side of the field is an automated 12-truck convoy. Each truck has space enough for 12 metric tons of produce. Powered by methane and augmented by solar-powered batteries, the convoy sits on a track that runs alongside 16 similar fields, each planted with a different crop. The track terminates at a robot-controlled processing plant 15 kilometers to the south. Humans are nowhere in sight. After sitting idle for 10 days, AH-1108 receives a message from its drone. The 2,900-acre field of tomatoes is ready for harvest. AH-1108 in turn signals the truck caravan to move into position to receive the produce. Engines fire up. Machines begin moving. AH-1108 enters the field, its wheels perfectly positioned to avoid damaging the tomatoes. 32 long metal and plastic arms unfold and extend from its body. As the machine glides smoothly across the field, its long, supple fingers gently twist and pluck tomatoes from their vines. Each tomato is carefully examined and placed on the appropriate rubber conveyor belt, which then carries it to the trucks. There, an AS-1404 pneumatic stacker gently lifts each tomato from the belt and deposits it on a cushioned shelf, cooled to a temperature of 5 degrees Celsius. Though quick and efficient, the AH-1108 harvester makes slow progress through the 2,900-acre field. By mid-afternoon, heavy, moist clouds have coalesced in the sky, and a vast nimbus has begun to pile up. The sky turns the color of lead. Lightning flashes. 2 hours later, with almost 1,000 metric tons harvested, a bolt of lightning strikes the metal track the trucks ride on. With just 10% of the truck's capacity filled, the truck convoy's engines suddenly fire up and begin moving down the track. Unaware that the trucks are gone, AH-1108 continues plucking the tomatoes from their vines and setting them on the conveyor belt. Aware that the trucks are gone, the AS-1404 stacker turns itself off. The tomatoes soon pile up, covering the tracks and spilling over into the area around them. On AH-1108's third pass across the field, it becomes mired in a swamp of crushed tomatoes. Unable to move, it uploads its performance data files to the Agricultural Geopolitical Artificial Intelligence Matrix, called AG for short, and turns itself off. Note, according to AG, the probability of an anomalous events like this occurring in the world of PANACEA is vanishingly small. So small, in fact, that no numerical value would appear until the fifth decimal place to the right of the decimal point, which would then round down to 0. After centuries of flawless operation, AG's central processing units had isolated themselves from the less important subworld of low-level autonomous operators. Damage reports were still uploaded to its computers, but because AG's resources were already overstretched, the reports were reduced to statistics and the raw data consigned to the archives. Chapter 1. There's a fine line in the lives of most children. On one side, they do as they're told, and on the other side, do only the things they want to do. 15-year-old Dorothea Madras Thorpe was often on the wrong side of that line, but, she would argue, that was exactly where she belonged. She had little in common with others her age classification. Not that she cared, at least not enough to change, just enough to feel left out. Two things gave her a sense of connection: books and her mentor, a 73-year-old man named Etruscan Mobius. The rest of it was mostly rubbish. She blamed it partly on the way she looked. One eye green, the other gold, heterochromia iridis. Apparently eye color was one of the easier genes to manipulate. Her parents had been unable to agree on eye color during the genetic selection process, so they compromised. Go figure. The genetic selection process in the world of PANACEA gave parents multiple options for their offspring, most of which were related to physical characteristics. Each trait cost them a certain number of points. To make sure not everyone specified a child superior in all aspects, parents started with 10 points and allocated those points to various features. Above average height, for example, cost 1 point. Eye color selection cost 1 point. Body type cost 2 points. High intelligence was worth 2 points. Dorothea thought the system was disgustingly primitive and a stupid way to perpetuate the species. She found the idea of giving birth both strangely attractive and repulsive. After all, robots didn't go through that kind of reproduction. She did like her pale blue skin and the gold and silver glitter that snaked down and around her body from the back of her neck to her left calf. But she wasn't unique. Almost everyone born in the previous 300 years had genetically modified physical characteristics. Billions had glitter embedded in their skin, or skin with a shimmering metallic tint. Copper was currently the most popular, gold and silver not far behind. Others sported tints of just about every color of the rainbow, mostly because parents were trying to outdo one another. Dorothea was thin, with lanky arms and sticks for legs, and already 5 feet 9 inches tall and still growing. Her hair was metallic gold with neon green highlights. It was tied in a ponytail that hung down between her shoulder blades. When it came to specifying Dorothea's intelligence, her parents unintentionally left that box unchecked, which was tantamount to spinning the genetic roulette wheel and hoping for the best. What they got was completely unexpected: a child with superhuman intelligence. Dorothea was 5 when her mom had told her that. It had explained a lot. Dorothea's genetic blueprint included elegantly wide-set eyes, which made the different colors more prominent. Her nose was delicately shaped, neither too round nor too hard-edged. Her upper lip turned up slightly, and her lower lip had a fullness that bordered on a pout. The dome in which Dorothea lived and would one day die was called Potomac Dome. It was one of 1,000 domes in PANACEA, spread across every continent except Antarctica. Potomac Dome comprised over 100,000 acres and was divided into 10 enclaves called campuses, each housing about 3 million people. Dorothea's enclave was called Brunswick Campus. Modeled after high-end all-inclusive tropical resorts, each campus was organized into areas of different functions. 100 high-rise apartment buildings, each with 30,000 people, were arranged along the dome's borders, festooned with palm trees, trickling streams, and rock formations. At the center hub were 50 restaurants, many with different themes. In between were sports facilities, water parks, game barns, movie theaters, and an assortment of multi-purpose venues. Dome life was all Dorothea knew, all that anyone knew. She didn't resent being given everything without any effort on her part. She did resent not having a viable alternative to playing or lying around or doing nothing every waking moment of every single day of the rest of her life. It was boring, and she felt a terrible waste of her time. In 1 week, she would join others her age, including her twin brother, on a 16th birthday celebration tour of Potomac Dome. The tour was their rite de passage to adulthood, formerly called the Age of Becoming. Yes, she was looking forward to being recognized and treated as an adult, but no, she didn't look forward to rubbing elbows with others her age. It was too programmed, too lacking in spontaneity, and too much like everything else in Potomac Dome life. She reflected on all this, troubling though it was, as she sat in one of Potomac Dome's 10 campus reading rooms. She stopped reading and sat there in a daze. This is wrong, all wrong. Wrong in little ways, wrong in big ways, wrong in every way. It is just too perfect. It must be wrong, has to be. Because if everything really were perfect here, why did she have this bitter taste in her mouth, this tightness in her chest, this volcanic anger that threatened to explode unless she screamed or hit someone, preferably a smug, cocky robot? Wasn't this the truest test of whether anything was right or wrong? Feelings, her angst? Maybe so. And why not? Weren't feelings the beginning of intellectual awareness? The more Dorothea thought about it, the more she was convinced she was right. She nodded at her reflection in the hermetically sealed, transparent bookcase across from where she sat. She smiled at her reflection, something she rarely did, then frowned. She stuck out her tongue. If anyone was watching, they'd probably scream, run, and hide from the lunatic she sometimes thought she was in the process of becoming. When she and others her age turned 16, the hormones that suppress sexual development would be gradually withdrawn. Until that time, 15-year-old boys spoke in high-pitched voices and had no facial hair. Girls didn't worry about menstrual cycles and whether their breasts were just right. Neither had pubic hair. She sighed and stood. She pressed her fists to the small of her back and rubbed. A reader assistance robot strode forward and immediately to assist her. She waved it off. It smiled, lowered its head, her head, for this robot was an android with a female body, and backed away. Even Dorothea referred to androids as he or she, depending on which interface was installed over its plastic and metal interior. Maybe she should invent a new pronoun for robots. She laughed aloud. Then, hearing her own voice break the silence, she coughed to disguise it. She could always distinguish androids from humans. So could most people over the age of 12. provided they bothered to make the effort. All artificially super intelligent mobile entities that interacted with humans, referred to as AIMs, AIM, had a human interface, essentially a face and body that looked human, but never got old, always smiled in the same slightly smug way, always gestured in the same way, a little bit like humans, Dorothea realized with a smirk. She couldn't help wondering, for perhaps the thousandth time, whether they were anatomically correct. But why would they be? What would they look like without those parts? Weird. She thought it odd that her antipathy toward androids was nothing new. The repulsion she, but not many others, felt had been dubbed the uncanny valley effect hundreds of years earlier. She imagined it was a worse problem when androids first began exhibiting human gestures, like clearing one's throat or sneezing or scratching one's head. Each time she saw an android make a human-like gesture, she wanted to grab it and scream, "Stop it! You're not fooling anyone." That's all.
Thank you
You.
so much, Richard. I think there's a lot of foreboding sense there. It feels very
a lot happening
accurate.
and going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing that reading to us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, of course. So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We do have a couple questions to start us off here already. So this first question is for all three authors. What kind of research did you do to bring authenticity to your book's setting, subject matter, themes, anything that was important to you as a writer? I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So to start us off, John, do you want to start here? John, it looks like you might still be muted. All right. So, John, what kind of... Yes, we can hear you now.
Right. When I was 8 years old and I was walking to school in the city of Glasgow, a friend and I used to kick the ball across the road to each other, and he kicked the ball down into the woods. I went down into the woods to retrieve the ball, and as I did so, I realized that during my lifetime there was going to be this great transition for the human race, and I was going to write a series of books which would provide guidance for humanity as we dealt with the transition. So I never chose the path which I followed. That happened to me. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Yeah, and what about you, Doc? What kind of research did you do to bring this book to, or bring authenticity to this book?
Again, as I mentioned before, it's really a matter of really understanding the places and understanding the people. And that means I had to go there. I had to be in the locations, listen, watch, and develop the characters there so that they fit for the reader into the actual environment. And I enjoy international travel. I always have. So it's a fun pursuit for me. But to me, it's invaluable for my writing. Absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, just planting yourself in a setting, I think, can do so much for bringing it to life in your writing. So I find that completely unsurprising. and I'm sure very fruitful on your end as the writer. And Richard, what about you? What kind of research did you do to bring authenticity to this world you've created?
Well, I have to admit that in science fiction, I would say that authenticity is the North Star. It's what every science fiction writer strives for. Um, for me, it's also plausibility. The constructs that we create within the story must seem plausible to many people who are involved in science and are, maybe educated in advanced science. Um, I actually wrote the first draft of Panacea back about 2010. I wrote it as a screenplay. It proved to be too large for that format, so I decided a year or so later to write it as a novel. That was about 2012, 2013. And at that point, there didn't seem to be much interest in artificial intelligence. When ChatGPT came out 2.5 years ago, suddenly everybody was talking about artificial intelligence, in particular the threats of artificial intelligence. So I dusted it off and finished and submitted it to Atmosphere. But so far as research goes, I don't think there was anything in particular I did. As you mentioned in your introduction, I do have a background in computers. I was a programmer back in the 1960s, and computer science in those days was quite different than it is today. So to span that period of time up to this point and to write something that would seem to be plausible, but in complete contradiction to the usual science fiction um, picture of the future, which is that robots will suddenly decide that human beings are persona non gratis and kill us off. I don't see that happening. It is certainly possible. And much of it depends on what we do now. And one of the reasons I wrote this book was I thought it was the best vehicle to get my message out there. And I hope it works. I'd love to get feedback from people who are truly into this discipline and who make money writing themselves about AI. Thank you.
Yeah, it ended up being very timely. I mean, part of that obviously was intentional, but
Yeah, that was divine inspiration, John, the music of the god.
absolutely. This next question is again for all three authors. This person says, can you please describe your experience working with Atmosphere? I promise I did not plant this question. It really did come in, but Doc, do you want to start us off with this one?
Certainly. I've quite frankly been delighted working with Atmosphere. I'm publishing 3 books this year through them. All I Buy is the second one. Third one, actually, I'm working on the interior design around this meeting. And I've been particularly thankful for my editor, who is very, very knowledgeable and extremely helpful. And as a result of his efforts, I think the works have been much better, been much improved. So these 2 books are out so far this year. The third will be out here hopefully this summer. And I have another one I'm currently writing that I plan to get to Atmosphere next year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to hear that everything with your editor has been so fruitful because that author-editor relationship is so crucial. So that's wonderful to hear. Richard, what about you? What has been your experience working with Atmosphere?
Well, I echo exactly what Doc said. My experience has been spectacular. They've been there. Unlike a lot of people you deal with these days where there's no response, there's no concern, there's nothing. They were very proactive in coming to me and giving me important feedback and so on. And as I pointed out, I mean, to me, that's worth an award of some sort. Oddly, it shows up backwards on my screen. I know it must be a
Oh, that
mirror.
is funny. It's correctly appearing on our end, so that is funny.
Wonderful, wonderful. So
But
yeah,
yes,
yeah, I've worked with them, over conventional publishers who seem to have drifted off into some black hole at the present time, and self-publishing seems to be the direction of the future. And if I were younger, yeah, I'd do the whole thing myself, but I'm not younger, obviously. So I'm going to stick with Atmosphere, and I have 2 more novels coming, perhaps later this year.
yeah, I totally understand what you mean about the responsiveness of people these days. It's a huge hurdle and it feels so insurmountable. So I'm glad that, that
Yeah.
was not an obstacle in this case. And
Yeah.
then, John, what about you? What has been your experience working with Atmosphere? If you want to go ahead and unmute first. Oh, John, it looks like you're still muted.
A thousand apologies.
All good.
I hate to be a nuisance. I am a firm believer that our lives are planned out in advance. My background is very, very strong Scottish Presbyterian Calvinist, and accepting that everything is planned out in advance is something which I take to like a duck taking to water. So Hermes Trismegistus in one of his books is asked by his son for guidance and how to navigate his way through an uncivilized, uncultured world. And Hermes Trismegistus said, I have nothing to say but this, seeing in myself that an uncreated vision has come to pass. Unless people have a vision as to what sort of future they should live, then they're going to be clutching at straws, being tossed to and fro here and there. They're like, guide me, O thou great Jehovah, over life's tempestuous sea. Guidance is necessary. And when I required guidance, it came to me. Like it says, if you read the prophets from the Old Testament, and the word of God came to Isaiah, the word of God came to Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the word of God came to Jonah a second time. My success and what has happened to me is simply and solely because the word of God came to me and I didn't have to go looking for guidance. I was a Sunday school boy, as you probably gathered. And of course, one of the great stories is the Exodus. And when the children of Israel were leaving their enslaved condition to make it to the promised land, they didn't have to find the way. There was a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. I was guided. I never looked. I waited. And what I expected came to pass. We're end of the teaching.
All right. Thank you, John. We've got one more question. This one is for Doc and Richard. You both mentioned new books you're publishing. Can you give us a sneak peek at those? Doc, do you want to start us off here?
Certainly. The next book that coming out through Atmosphere, hopefully this summer, takes place in Ireland. I spent several months there over 2 years doing research for the story. It's actually a little bit different for me in that it's an Irish love story. And I wanted to challenge thrillers tend to be more exposition and little dialogue, whereas a love story tends to be more dialogue with less exposition. So I wanted to see if I could do it, and it worked well. The book that I'm working on writing currently takes place in Alaska, starting in June of 1941. I've been to Alaska 7 times, my favorite domestic destination. But this last fall, I went up for about a month and doing nothing but research for this story to get, the flavor and the feel and the look and the smell of the place. So to me, that's the key.
Well, I think a genre turn is exciting to look forward to. So that'll be exciting to see as that comes out. And Richard, what about you? What's up next for you? Oh, there we go.
There we go. First up is a novel called White House at Night. I wrote it first as a screenplay and am in the process of novelizing it, primarily because it's extremely difficult to sell screenplays these days. They're very expensive to produce into movies. And it's by the same token, the opposite token, it's much easier to publish. I don't want to give away too much about it, but it stems from a discovery that my wife and I made when we were in St. Petersburg, Russia in the mid-90s. We saw a collection of paintings that didn't belong where they were. There was actually a book published about them, and the man who collected those paintings, by the name of Otto Krebs, had died in 1941. And there's almost no information available about this collection because it was in fact stolen by the Soviet Army in the late 40s. And there was no information about that particular set of paintings until 1995. And when we found that out, I initially was just aghast that almost no one knew about this theft and about the collection. It's a pretty extraordinary collection, 74 paintings. So I decided to create the middle part of that story, and that has become the novel White House at Night. I don't want to give away too much because even the title is suggestive of what the story is about. The second one also was and still is a screenplay, and it's called Death on the Blue Nile. And it also derives from actual fact, and that fact is that reputedly the largest treasure of all times is that of Ramses the Great. John could probably confirm that. Ramses II, who was he was the pharaoh for 66 years, and the treasure that he was buried with took 100 slaves over a month to load into underground chambers. And today, there's not one single artifact of his treasure left. Now, the historians believe that grave robbers must have taken it. But if that had happened and not one single artifact has ever appeared, then that is the basis for a what if story. And I won't go into it any further than that because, spoiler alerts, they're both revelatory in the sense that as you read it, you learn more and more of what the story is about, really about. Okay.
Yeah. So we've got two rather speculative novels on the horizon. Very exciting
Yeah,
to.
not science fiction, but I guess they would fall into mystery, suspense, thriller, slash
Right.
slash adventure, little bit
Yeah,
of
lots to look forward to.
romance.
Well, that's very exciting. We know we've got these future texts, we've got these present books that we just heard from today. And on the topic of those, I just want to say thank you so much to John, Doc, and Richard for sharing these books with us and being generous with your time, your words, of course, your thoughts in this Q&A. Thank you also to everybody in the audience for joining us to celebrate these wonderful authors. Don't forget that you can order Absolute Ibis Monarchy, Olive Eye, and Panacea, The Age of Ag from the links in the chat. I'm just putting those links in the chat one more time for everybody so you can easily access them there. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for today. So have a great rest of your week and a great weekend, everyone.